We don't know what has been the focus of government. We have then decided that in this economic cluster, we will have one minister at a time. We will bring the other ministers in the same way as we are bringing the Minister of Transport today. We'll bring the Minister of Trade and Industry. We'll bring the Minister of Agriculture, Land and other related matters. We'll bring the Minister of Tourism. We have ample time to do all these things, but we have decided as the NCCC and Cabinet not to conflate messages at any single time. Today, therefore, we are bringing to the nation the Minister of Transport, Minister Fikile Mbalula, to speak to us what measures are we taking to combat the spread of disease in the transport sector. Minister.
Chief, kufa order with thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Jackson Mthembu, and all colleagues from GCIS. I'm with the Director General and the Deputy Minister of Transport, Medical Lady Magadzi, and Mr. Alec Muyemi, the DG of Transport. In addressing the nation on the 12th of July 2020, President Ramaphosa warned us that the storm is upon us. Indeed, the devastation of the pandemic is sweeping across our country at an alarming speed. The choices we have to make as a nation have become that much harder as we try to walk the tightrope of preserving human life while gradually resuming economic activity to ensure sustainable livelihoods. As a sector, we carry the burden of enabling economic activity whilst containing the spread of the virus. Through our various modes of transport, we have no doubt that public transport could pose a real threat to the efforts towards containment of the rapid spread of the pandemic. It is for that very reason, that having duly and widely consulted, we have put in place additional and more stringent measures as we incrementally resume public transport operations across various modes. In playing our part towards halting the rapid spread of the pandemic, it is imperative that we strengthen compliance with health protocols and tighten the hand of the law. We are all enjoined in the obligation to arrest the spread of the virus and preserve human life. Government will therefore not tolerate conduct that places the lives of public transport users at risk. Violation of the regulations and any of the directions we are issuing today is a criminal offense, and law enforcement authorities will act without fear or favor. Over the last few weeks, we have been engaging in intense discussions with the taxi industry on the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the significant losses the industry continues to incur. We engaged with the taxi industry leadership in good faith, and we found each other on many areas, but there are areas where we differed. However, the door remains open for further engagements on issues where we are not in agreement. We have always understood this engagement as cordial and not characterized by high flare of emotions, as our tackling of the COVID-19 is not a one-man show. It needs all of us on board. We have had to put emotions aside and go deeper to understand what faces the taxi industry and how we can mitigate the situation by ensuring that we keep the balance of livelihoods, at the same time ensuring that we preserve human life. We have also held productive engagements with the Banking Association South Africa on further relief measures they can extend to the taxi industry. Because the reality that faces a taxi owner in the Republic of South Africa, a taxi owner who operates in an industry which is a catalyst of our economy and an important mode of transport, is key in relation to ownership and servicing the debt that the owner owes to that particular banking sector. We are happy to indicate that banks have been responsive to our proposals. We have not been a trade union of the taxi industry to the banks. We acted as an intercede between ourselves and taking up issues that require attention of the taxi industry, to help the taxi industry in particular when it comes to issues of debt and debt relief, and to provide appropriate financial relief. Individual banks have their own procedures and measures in place and will make appropriate pronouncements in this regard. Various banks have offered repayment holidays and redetermination of the terms of agreement with individual borrowers. The banks will also in due course communicate their decisions to the borrowers and the public in this regard on their COVID-19 related relief measures. And I wish to thank Abba Omar from the National Banking Association and all our major banks and all the banks in the Republic for affording us an ear and also listen to us and engage honestly with a view to try and assist this important industry in our country. While the rules relating to disinfecting and sanitizing public transport facilities, as well as social distancing, have been in place, we have now placed the responsibility to enforce this squarely on the hands of the owners of each facilities. Equally, these owners may not allow any member of the public to enter their facilities without wearing a cloth face mask, homemade item, or another appropriate item that covers the nose and mouth. And we are encouraged by many South Africans who have, right from the word go, listened and practice this new way of life of putting on your masks as you go around and interact in places of public interaction. We salute them, for they are not doing it for government. They are doing it for human life and preservation of human life. They're doing it for themselves. They're doing it to contribute to the fight against coronavirus. Similarly, drivers and other employees must wear such face masks or appropriate item that covers the nose and mouth together with a face shield. We know that there are others whom in Zulu we refer to amahlongandlebe. When the nation is moving in this direction, kamakhola ngokubona. They want to see things happening before they can follow into the new way of life. They want to see people dying. They want to see, is this corona the truth, and all of that. We know they are there in our midst. They undermine the law, whether it is normal and abnormal, they do. We say 70%, they wouldn't load 70%, they wouldn't put on the masks, they will come to work without listening and all of that. But in this instance, there are those who have carried, the torch and ensuring that they oblige and they follow through in terms of the regulations. In his address, President Ramaphosa announced that taxis undertaking local trips will now be permitted to increase their capacity to 100%, while long-distance taxis will not be allowed to exceed 70% occupancy, on condition that new risk mitigation protocols related to masks, vehicle sanitizing, and open windows are followed. So those are strict protocols that come with this decision. This decision have received criticism from our people and different organizations who have met, and we have gone to them. We have been to NEDLAC with my team and explained to them why we have to go through this, and we have engaged as well with health practitioners who have given us their expert view, and in this particular instance, we have had to come to the middle road in terms of what needs to happen going forward. And we wish to thank them also for their participation and for listening to us and engaging with us on this particular matter. To this end, bus, taxi, and e-hailing, meter taxis, shuttle services, chauffeur-driven vehicles, and scholar transport vehicles are permitted to carry 100% of licensed carry capacity for any trip not regarded as long-distance travel. Long-distance travel refers to any trip that is 200 kilometers or longer. Now, that is in terms of even our law of the country. The National Land Transport Act defines what is long distance, and it says it is 200 or longer, and that is how it defines that. And so long distance in this instance will refer to that in terms of our regulations. Commuter rail is permitted to carry 70% of licensed carry capacity following extensive consultations. Stakeholders, we noted the need to increase on the loading capacity within the public transport sphere. We further noted the need to tighten the mitigation measures linked to the increase in the loading capacity. Consultations with health experts was undertaken, and their additional recommendations in the face of the increased loading capacity were duly considered and accepted and integrated and will be implemented as such. The introduction of the additional measures to curb the spread of the virus in a 100% loaded public transport vehicle include the following. All operators must ensure that public transport vehicles are sanitized before picking up and after dropping off passengers. All public transport vehicles' windows must be kept at 5 centimeters open on both sides. All public transport vehicles must be fitted with window jammers or blockers in order to keep the windows 5 centimeters open. Operators must ensure that all public transport vehicle doors, window handles, armrests, and handrails are sanitized after every load. Passengers must be encouraged to sanitize after they enter the vehicle and after getting off the vehicle. Any marshal or security officer who interacts with the public, who interacts with members of the public in a public transport facility must wear a cloth face mask or a homemade item or another appropriate item that covers the nose and mouth, and together with face shield. Passengers in public transport vehicles are obliged to wear a cloth face mask or a homemade item or another appropriate item that covers nose and mouth throughout the journey. No person or passenger will be allowed to use any form of public transport or enter a building, place, or premises if they do not wear a cloth face mask or a homemade item or another appropriate item that covers nose and mouth. All public transport operators must put measures in place to adhere to physical distancing, to curb the spread of the virus. Intra-provincial metropolitan areas and district public transport is permitted to operate without a requirement for a permit. Long-distance travel is permitted for a person permitted to travel between provinces in terms of alert level 3. Permits as prescribed in level 3 regulations remain a compulsory requirement. Law enforcement authorities have a duty to enforce compliance with the law. This is a necessary evil whose sole purpose is to curb the spread of the virus across provincial epicenters. Our commitment to preserving human life cannot be sacrificed for expediency. Mini and minibus taxi vehicles may not carry more than 70% of their maximum licensed passenger carrying capacity for long distance, intra-provincial level, and permitted inter-provincial travel. Long-distance bus services are permitted to carry a maximum of 70% of their permissible passenger carrying capacity for intra-provincial and permitted inter-provincial travel. Long-distance rail operations and travel remains prohibited. Transportation of liquor is only permitted for movement from a manufacturing plant to storage facilities, as well as transportation from manufacturing facilities to exit port for export. However, transportation of liquor for sale, dispensing and distribution to customers is prohibited. Equally, there will be those who are overzealous and they have an uncontrollable desire to get drunk and sell alcohol, who will defy the regulations. And even in their case, the rule of law will bite, because that is not permitted. The validity period for all public transport operating licenses and accreditation certificates for tourist services that expired during the lockdown period will be deemed valid for a further period of 90 days. This is to enable the provincial regulatory entities and the national public transport regulator sufficient time to deal with the backlog and allow affected operators to renew their operating licenses and accreditation certificate for tourist services. Following our announcement on the 29 June 2020 on domestic airports permitted to resume operations, we hereby today announce that the following additional airports have met all the requirements of a South African Civil Aviation Authority and will resume operations from the 21st of July 2020. The Premier of the Eastern Cape will be happy with this one. East London Airport will be open from the 21st of July. George Airport, the Minister of Economic Development in the Western Cape will also be happy. George Airport will be open, and Kimberley Airport will also be opened from the 21st of July. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We will now take questions. Let me just add to your welcoming of the Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister, we appreciate your presence here. Of course, DG, there's no way that you could not have been here. Thank you very much. We will now take questions on the input to the nation that has been made by Minister Fikile Mbalula. Now, as we have said, this facility does not have a phone-in infrastructure as we do have at GCIS. We therefore rely on all those who would like to ask questions, engaging with us through the WhatsApp system that they will be familiar with now, and I'm quite certain that all journalists are quite familiar with our WhatsApp number. Now, the voice of that WhatsApp number is Nongeba Mhlawuli. Nongeba, do we have questions now?
Yes, Minister, we do.
Thank you.
The first question is from Jolene van Wyk from Media 24. She's asking, will the ban on the transportation of alcohol for sale, dispensing and distribution to customers stay in place for the whole of the lockdown, no matter what level we are at? Bonga Dlulani from EWN is asking, COVID-19 has shown how government has failed for years to provide an integrated and reliable transport system. Going forward, are you at the stage of discussing how you can improve this so you're not caught off guard again? Usthembile from The Times is asking, what is the status of the 1 billion rand relief fund, given the initial rejection of it, and SARS as the implementing agency? Have there been any applications as of yet, and have any been approved? She's also asking, what is the procedure when law enforcement stop a long-distance vehicle where not every commuter is in possession of a permit to cross borders? And the following question is from Nazir from Glow TV. What is the maximum passengers percentage allowed in a private vehicle and used for private transport? Secondly, what is the maximum percentage of passengers allowed in a private vehicle and that used for private transport? And he's also asking, are airlines also restricted to the 75% maximum load?
Maybe for now, let's stop there so that we are able to get the responses. There is the first one. Who will respond, Minister? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will all know that the Department of Transport announced 6 priority areas in relation to our work, and we placed that before Parliament. We, however, acknowledge that even before COVID arrived, that there are certain areas we should have moved with speed to address in terms of public transport. And in terms of our 6 or so priority areas in this 6th administration, led by President Ramaphosa, we are rolling up our sleeves and we are very clear in terms of what needs to be done to change the situation for the better. The past 26 years, we have had policies, and marvelous work has been done by successive governments. Our task, if you understand the Khawuleza spirit, is to get things done and done faster and practically for everyone to see. I wish to repeat once more that when COVID arrived and interrupted us, we had to put in abeyance some of the things we have set aside for ourselves to do. But that is temporarily, because we had to put all hands on deck and focus on this invincible enemy, and something that we didn't know. When will it end? How fast does it go? Where does it go? And because we can only read in history 1918 about the Spanish flu. And we went down, led by the president, to action and implement some of the things that we had to do. So you will know, particularly in terms of the taxi industry, that I wish to repeat again that we do have plans, and those plans are focused on full regulating of the taxi industry and full formalization of the taxi industry and professionalizing of the taxi industry. Because formalization and professionalizing are two different things. Because professionalizing means that how you look at the industry in terms of its image should actually be professional. The driver must know how to speak to people, and then the service to the people itself must be proper. Just like when you enter in an aeroplane, there is that sweet voice that tells you the distance and when to eat. And then there is that mellow voice that tells you the distance you are at and where you are going and at what time you are going to arrive. And if there are delays, you are actually told. So that is professionalizing. So the professionalizing that would like to see in our public transport, in particular the taxis. But formalization will include a whole lot of things for the taxi industry, which at the present moment, those things don't apply when COVID arrived. So you know that taxi industry is not subsidized. It's not subsidized. As a result, they are double hit in terms of COVID-19. They are owing banks, they are indebted, and all of that. And then they are not covered in terms of relief means that we have actually presented to the nation of the 500 billion rand. Even the 1.135 ex gratia payment we are going to give to the taxi industry does not address compensation or loss or loan that they can go to and basically get this sort of support. They can't. So we have had to bring this as a way of relief. And ex gratia is not compensation. It is a once-off payment, which it is done as a way of gratitude to our people. And at the same time, we have decided that it will actually be once off, which is the matter that we are dealing with now with the taxi industry. But where we are going is to discuss all these issues and finalize them. It's not an easy discussion if you have followed the taxi industry in our country and its evolution. It's not going to be an easy discussion between us and them, but it's a discussion that all of us around the table, we are committed to conclude and sort it out. Because if there's anything, COVID-19 have shown us flames. Because if all of these things would have been resolved, the package that the bus have got in the country, the taxi industry would have had, we will not be having a discussion about 100% today in South Africa for the taxi industry, because government does contribute. So by April next year, and between this year and end of the year, the remainder of the months, we are going to launch a big platform in the next coming 2 weeks, And we are going to have a big discussion on this matter, and we want to conclude it by end of the year. So everybody is going to come on board. And then we're going to discuss these issues with a view of having a formalized taxi industry and a subsidized taxi industry and all of that. Everything that we are doing now is a stopgap measure. It's a stopgap measure in reality because of COVID-19. And you cannot say South Africa, in terms of its means of public transport, we are number one, or we are where we want us to be. We are nowhere, anywhere close to where we want to be. We want a modernized means of transport, and we want to expand the means of mass public transport from trains to taxis, so that to travel around South Africa and to access transport, it must be cheaper, it must be accessible, and at the same time, it must be a safer mode of transport. And that is what we are addressing. So that you can be in Europe, you can go to a train, you are good. You can be in a taxi, you are fine. You can be in an e-hailing system, you are even better. We want South Africa to be like that. Yes, we talk speed rail and all of those plans. That is part of our dream that we are implementing as we speak right now. And you are right about dealing with long-term plans and ensuring that we implement some of them, which this year has been taken away altogether. Because what we have been doing, we have been, sipula umlilo. We have been, shutting flames that are coming our direction. It is 100% today. It will be something else tomorrow. Our rail system is totally shattered. We are 4 years behind in terms of our modernization program. And our interventions there tells the story. And we want to change that setup to get a metro rail in the Republic to ferry more than 20 million people as it does, safe, faster, and and cheaper. And we are going to get there. We are going to get there as we move along, as we implement these plans, which is what we are doing in the Department of Transport. Transportation of alcohol. The National Coronavirus Council is informed on all decisions that it takes by what is called the net joints. The net joints include all state departments and operators, and they inform the speed and the evaluation of some of the decisions we have taken. How far can we go with their implementation, etc., etc. So alcohol is not a ban, it's suspended because people are just uncontrollable. And at the same time, we have now at least had a taste of seeing what alcohol can do, rather than talking about theory and fighting with Fikile about alcohol. The reality is with us. The stats are with us. The research is with us. We have seen what alcohol does. But equally in our plan, in terms of how we navigate, there are two schools of thought. The other one says, let things stay for the economy the way they are. There is another one that says, prioritize health. South Africa, we have taken an approach that balances the two. Livelihoods, and at the same time, get the economy going. When we win Corona, which we are going to win, there must be a country here. There must be an economy to function. And I know people are not happy about this and that, but at the end of the day, we've got to preserve lives, livelihoods. And we want no 100%. We want no 70%. We want 50%. So that you can see visible distancing inside the taxi. In South Africa today, can you achieve that? If you were to do that, 50% in the taxis, let's confront the reality. Where will the taxi industry be in the next 2 months? Who will pay their installments? Because even the banks we are talking to postponement of the debt. It's not that the debt will be written off. Where will they be? Leave how you feel about the taxi industry and all of that. Let's confront the reality. Unfortunately, that reality is visiting us when we are dealing with these issues. We are dealing with these issues, we are restructuring, and at the same time, we are addressing formalization so that the taxi industry, which transport majority of the populace, the working class and the workers of our country, can also be supported by state intervention. But at the same time, should any corona come our way in future, they must find our house intact when it comes to the means of public transport. So I appeal to South Africans and to everybody that we have done everything in our power and we have looked everything and we have addressed the issue of the preservation of lives, and we have gone to MAC, engaged with them. It was not an easy discussion together ourselves, and we brought the taxi industry on board. Like all matters of COVID-19, decisions are not easy. They are not easy. Talk about cigarette, talk about alcohol, every decision we take, you take it, you are damned. You don't take it, you are damned. Even now, when you can see what alcohol is doing to us, in terms of our plans, there are still people out there who believe that we are very stupid. We are a government that must not be respected. We are a president who doesn't know what he's doing. And they say it open, without fear, and they openly campaign about it. That is South Africa. In other countries, you will never find that. It's freedom of expression. But we must understand at the end of the day, government has got to take decisions. And some of the decisions might be right, some of them may not be right. But if you are in the bench and you are looking at the match that is playing, it can be football or any match, you speak like as if you can do wonders when you are inside. You can score goals, it's very easy. You can't miss a goal inside the penalty area. That player is stupid, he must be replaced. Just like now, we are a government. Other people are outside, they think what we do is very stupid. But what do we do as government? We listen, and some of the things that people say, and they believe and they feel strong about them, we don't take them sometimes. And sometimes we ourselves were wrong. But we have intensified ensuring that our decisions are well informed and we gather our strength. It's not like this COVID visited us and there is a lot of money. I hear people say that COVID-19 money has been chowed left and right. I don't know. I see the scooters issue in the Eastern Cape. Did the money go there? And if it went there, how do we deal with that particular point? Anybody who's corrupt, where there is money, there is corruption. The system we live in allows corruption because people are greedy, they steal people's money. The responsibility of the state is to arrest people who are corrupt. But the state cannot be hamstrung from taking decisions because there are corrupt elements. The state capability and its capacity at this present moment is tested to the limit. It's tested to the limit. The capability to do things that people have said, where was this capacity? People didn't have water here. Why couldn't you do this and address it just like that? People didn't have housing. How did you do it so quick and turn around and all of that? So that capacity will go with us, part of it part of it will stay behind. So we've got to learn all the time about how we go forward. So I'm just saying that there is nothing that I can stand here today as a minister and vouch that is 100% sealed, is impenetrable. And as a result, I put my head on the block. Nobody will be infected out of this approach. The point is we've got to evaluate, and at the same time, we are faced with other difficult challenges in our horizon and all of that. And we will miss a point if we compare. Compare the taxis with airlines. DG will speak about that, about the airlines. I want also for him to speak about HEPA. I spoke about HEPA the other day, and then it became a big joke because I used the word that HEPA eats the viruses inside the aeroplane. And then they said, look at that thing that didn't go to school. It says a virus can be eaten in an aeroplane, you know. But experts, when they explain that high efficiency particulate air filters do, which were fitted in all our aeroplanes, what does it do? And then they switch off. There is a reason. And nobody goes to the airport without permit and get into the flight and go. Flights are making a loss as we speak because nobody flies and nobody goes and fly besides any other thing. People are afraid. Now the virus has stopped to become theory. Ishaya endlini. It takes your wife. Usakhulume estradeni. Mbalula, Minister of Transport, yede, tatu nozu wendlini. COVID. You see, so loud mouths throughout the world, even who did not want to do certain things, they are in bed. I heard the Prime Minister of Britain said, never again, I've seen heaven. He came back. And thank you for being saved. So every day this thing is with us. It reacts differently to people you can see. You see, to some it comes fast and take away the life. To some it's protracted. You live with it, you defeat it without even seeing the doctor. But we are together in this. And so we might have taken decisions that do not favor you. I appealed to NEDLAC and the workers to say, give us a chance to implement these measures because workers must get to work, the taxi industry must survive, and then this is the balancing act. According to us, in a normal environment, taxis will be driving at 40%. 40% will be. Even 70% that we're talking about, if you know what a taxi is, come close and tell me about the social distance and so on. So that is why we say ventilators, because we have been advised. Again, I don't want to get into that space because it's not mine. We've been advised about that, and then keep on the masks and then sanitize. And last night, I had a meeting with MECs to sharpen our distribution because people keep saying, taxi such and such does not sanitize, Comrade Jackson, Minister. It does not sanitize, the driver does not sanitize, yet we are giving sanitize, supplying to the different thing. So we're sharpening that approach because this thing is with us and we've got to get along and ensure that we provide what we can provide as government. DG will address all the other issues in terms of airline, restricted capacity, maximum number in the car, and permit in terms of the borders. The 1 billion rand is with us, is our money. As Tembele Kele, you asked that question, what's going to happen to it? We are discussing what must happen to it. It must go to the taxi industry at the end. We don't want it to go back to the treasury. There are few issues that we are differing about, but we are discussing with the taxi industry on the matter and to look at the better mechanisms of how we can distribute that money. But at the end of the day, it must go to the industry. And that is what we want to do about it, and probably even alleviate some of the pressures that are there in terms of the taxi industry. Because even now, you introduce 100%, not everybody is in the street. That 100% is not in a full, opened economy. And that is what we must understand, because taxis are not full. Some get full, some don't. Largely, everybody mind their business at home. And that is it. Besides, we are at level 3. As much as Kukwis piti pandle, but we are not at 100% in terms of the economy opening. DG?
Thank you, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Minister and colleagues and members of the media. The first answer is on the long distance travel as to the procedure law enforcement officers are required to undertake when they find that people do not have a permit. I think up until the recent revision of the regulations, this has not been quite uniform in how it has been applied. But the reality is that anybody who travels cross-border, meaning the provincial border or interprovincially without a permit, is actually committing an offense. In as far as this is concerned, the expectation is that everybody who wishes to travel between provinces, other than those that have a Form 3C, which is a form signed by an employer showing that they stay across a specific provincial border. Because in truth, South Africa is a unitary state and our borders are quite soft borders. They were never intended to be hard borders the way COVID is saying to us that we need to utilize them to stop the spread of the virus. So consequently, they are citizens of one province. Let's take an example of people staying in the Vaal. And there, two provinces meet, Gauteng as well as the Free State province. And as it would be, there are those who stay within the towns of the Free State, such as Sasolburg, such as Parys and Vredefort and so on, Dennisville, who daily either go and to work in Vereeniging, which is part of Gauteng, and who also work perhaps in the CBD of Johannesburg and other parts of Gauteng province, and vice versa. And there are those who stay here but work at the Dome or the Val Marina and so on, which is part of the other side. So having said that, the intent is really to make ease of movement for those in that specific category, and then they are given this one form that they can produce on a day-to-day basis as they cross. But there are those who take longer distances. Let's take a citizen who stays in Mahikeng but wishes to go to come to Gauteng, say to Johannesburg or to Pretoria. And the difficulty there is that they need to apply to cross, and the reasons for which they can come across that border are listed in the regulations. They may be seeking medical advice, they may be looking for attending a funeral or going for other related approved matters that are contained as reasons valid enough for a person to move, or alternatively, their industry may now be reopening and they're required to now be moving back to come to work, and they need to apply for that. So that's said and done, that is the basis. So I think police will answer better as to how they handle those that are there and those that do not have. But now the new regulations make it clear that that is an offense, and if that is the case, we all know what happens to people who commit offenses in the Republic. In as far as the issue of maximum number of passengers in a private vehicle, this together now with the revision, the ministerial directions that will be gazetted later tonight, indeed will prescribe this matter, and this matter now will allow for full capacity of a vehicle, obviously with all precautions. It's now compulsory for everybody leaving their houses to wear masks, and if you are going to load passengers, you would be required then that those passengers should be having masks on. Which takes us to the issue of the airlines and what restricted capacity should airlines have. As Minister has indicated at previous press conferences, we are now guided by, and we are also benchmarking with what the rest of the world is doing, and we have looked at the airline industry and its reintroduction to service, and in terms of the services that it renders, and have duly considered, and it is for this reason that after we had stress tested the proposals that the airline industry in South Africa has put before us, and I've asked the regulator in the South African Civil Aviation Authority to look and review the measures. Back then, when we allowed for airline industry to start operation, we allowed them to operate at 100%. This has been a bit of a sore matter to other modes in as far as this is concerned, but we have reasons why we arrived at the issue of 100% loading. The first reason, and which is major, and is a scientific reason, it's the fact that all airlines, as Minister has indicated, that were manufactured after 1980, and as you now know, majority of our scheduled fleet that operate within South African borders on a domestic basis, most of those aircrafts are now airworthy, and with their airworthy certificates do indicate that they have been manufactured after that date. So all aircraft manufactured after that date of 1980 are fitted as a mandatory thing with a HEPA filter, the high efficiency particulate air filter. Now, depending on which study you review or you read, the HEPA filter is quite efficient. It has efficiency levels of anything between 99.97 to 99.99%, depending on which study you read. But you can see just how efficient the reviews are. And the HEPA filter's job is to remove dust particles and also airborne contaminants that will include viruses as well as bacteria. What the filter also does in an airline is that it pushes a constant downward wash of air at a meter per second, and that reduces the risk of contamination. It is that push of fresh air that indeed does what the minister has said it does, that it actually eats the virus, for a lack of a better word. But what it does is that it actually captures the virus in the tiny microfiber in the filter and the carbon fibers that are there. We looked also at what IATA was saying, which is the International Air Travel Association, and they had noted that HEPA, for purposes of this, because when the HEPA filters were designed, they were not designed for COVID, they were designed for influenza. But it has now been reviewed and found, even by IATA, that they are quite efficient as well at dealing with COVID as an issue. And they did note that the mixture of 50% recirculated internal air, when mixed with 50% of fresh air from the outside, that efficiency level is kept, and that it can deal with COVID succinctly. The second level or second issue of our consideration in allowing airlines to load 100% was the issue of the levels of professionalism and compliance levels within the airline industry. The airline industry has quite well-established safety protocols. I'm sure for all of you in here, you have flown somewhere before, and you would know exactly what happens. There is a safety drill, there is every other thing, and everybody seems to comply in an airline space. Unlike in other modes, we do not see that in trains, we don't see that in taxis, and we don't see that in most buses. But on some long distance buses, we also see high levels of compliance with established drills and practices, as well as safety protocols that are there. But in the airline industry, this is at a much, much higher level of compliance. And I would give you an example. When you are told by a steward, an air steward, to say, it's now time to listen to the captain's announcement, do take off your headphones, everybody complies. And everybody takes off their headphones, and that happens. And this holds the airline industry in good stead in as far as us trusting that the measures that they say they would implement will be implemented. Which brings us to the third aspect, which is the legal protocols available within civil aviation in our country. Our Civil Aviation Act and its enforcement is at a high level. And you know, Minister said they speak in nice voice, but they tell you very serious matters. From the time you are in the airport and they tell you that anyone making funny jokes and what is liable to prosecution and every other thing. And even internally when you are in the flight, they tell you that anyone disobeying the duties of the crew and so on is liable to an offense in terms of the Civil Aviation Act and the regulations. This is significant in as far as this matter is concerned, because when we do say that everybody must wear a mask inside an aircraft, at no stage will any of the passengers take off that mask, because they know what the implications are upon arrival. Because all it will take is for an air host to tell the captain that you disobeyed and you took off the mask, and you know police will be waiting for you upon arrival. When that flight lands, at that door of that aircraft, you will meet your fate at that moment. And it is because of such high, and the fact that the crew and the captain take responsibility for enforcement of established laws and rules and regulations, that we can trust that that will be the case and that safety levels will be higher. The last issue for us was that we took additional measures as well, and we noted the additional measures that the airline industry were suggesting. For instance, we looked at what will most likely contaminate the aircraft, and we benchmarked against studies done by IATA and by other airlines globally. And we realized that among the key things that we need to put aside, amongst them is the issue of serving food, because then contamination may move around a lot and you will not be able to eat with your mask on. And we also duly considered that because we're still in domestic operation, the longest trip you can actually take is 2 hours. And that is not too long for people to be hungry. And we also do not offer water anymore in the cabin. You actually have to ask for water, and you actually also have to really be thirsty and explain the reason why you can't wait to drink water upon arrival. And so with that, the airline industry also has other advantages. They enforce the issue of permits better. They look at all passengers traveling, we know who they are. And that makes it easy for tracking and tracing. Should any of the people who were passengers test positive, we can now follow quickly everybody who has been on that aircraft, unlike in other modes. The people who have been in that metro rail train between New Canada to Park Station, we are likely never going to know who was in that train and who came in and who came out. So I think while other modes want to compare themselves with this and with our decision for loading, it has to be balanced against all these considerations. And that the decision we took, we believe, was quite rational. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We received a question as well from Azara Karim from News 24, who's asking, let me read it. I understand that there is a growing call within the Ministerial Advisory Committee to release to the public advisories that government receives to inform the COVID-19 decisions. I'm working on a story about this. Could you please answer a few questions for me? First one, is government prepared to release advisories it receives to the public? If not, what is the justification for keeping these confidential? Do you believe that releasing these advisories could inform the public to make better decisions and create a bigger public buy-in or stronger social contract to fight COVID-19? Now, we will answer this question. We have answered it, in fact. It's unfortunate that some people who might be advising us might then go outside and want us to take out their own advice. Very, very unfortunate. But now, in any environment, people who advise you, they advise you confidentially. Now, their advice might not be implemented as it came, because whatever advice that comes to government, we deliberate on whatever advice, whether it's from the Ministerial Advisory Committee, whether it's from the Health Council or anybody that advises government. We deliberate and ultimately come to a decision, either informed by that advisory as is or a changed form of that advisory. So we don't think that it will be a right thing. Well, in the entire world, advisories, even in the private sector, are confidential, are meant for the people that they are being advised. Similarly, even in the public sector, advisories that come to us as government are meant for our eyes and are meant to assist us to reach certain decisions. And we do acknowledge in many instances that we have taken these decisions on advice of professionals, on advice of experts. So we therefore would not agree with the notion that any advisories that come to us as government, we must make them public. It will not make any sense, because even those advisories get discussed, get even changed, and after serious discussions, certain decisions are taken, either informed by those advisories or by some quantum change in those advisories. We hope that we have answered this question. The Minister of Health, by the way, did answer this question as well, that these advisories are meant for government and therefore they are not meant for the public. Therefore, why would you make these advisories available to the public when they are meant for you? In fact, the public people will ask you, are you stupid? Are you dumb? These advisories are meant for you. Why are you bringing them to our attention? Thank you very much. Can we then take the remaining questions for Minister and the team?
Thank you, Minister. Patrick from Fleet Watch is asking, you mentioned an extension of operating licenses for tourist services, the renewal of driver's licenses and professional driver's permits was granted an extension of 90 days from 1st of June. However, many centers did not open on the 1st of June, and since then, many have opened and then closed due to the need to sanitize. This is causing a huge problem for truck drivers in renewing their DPS, which normally takes up to 2 months. Can the extension be further extended? Govan from ENCA, and related to this question, it's around the 100% taxis. So I'll just ask all of the questions together that's related to the 100% taxi capacity. He's asking, Minister, when you say you had to find the middle road when considering the concessions given to taxi owners, what are the reasons government agreed to load 100% of taxis when the advice was to restrict the numbers allowed? Related to that is a question from Sipho Stirman from the SABC. Did you get any considered expert advice or any scientific backing that the 100% load for taxis is not going to place people in danger, especially as we are seeing COVID-19 cases increasing by thousands daily? Or is this simply about appeasing the taxi industry? Another related question is from Wonga Sikhai from Inkonjane FM. How does the department expect people to open windows in this cold weather since COVID-19 stays longer in a cold place? Then Govan, again from ENCA, is asking, Business Leadership South Africa has accused government of ambushing business with the latest announcement of the alcohol sale ban. Government is being accused of not consulting sufficiently before publishing the latest regulations. What is your response? Christian Duplessis from Nadverferendondach is asking, would you please elaborate on steps from government to formalize the taxi industry? What are the requirements for taxi operators to qualify for the relief? Kaunda from The Citizen is asking, on the point, open quotes, all public transport vehicles must be fitted with window jammers or blockers in order to keep the windows 5 centimeters open, close quote. He's asking, will the expenses for fitting these items be covered by the taxi operators themselves? What measures have or will be implemented to further ensure compliance with this requirement? And the last question is from Christian, and it's also is asking, do you have to wear a mask in your own car? Thank you, Minister.
Whilst the colleagues are coming to answer the questions, the whole of South Africa will know that when the sale of liquor was allowed on the 1st of June, as we got into the third level, we know for a fact that there are many lives that were lost because of car accidents, induced by drunken driving. We also know for a fact that many beds, they were scrambled for hospital beds by people who were either shot during scuffles arising from drunken behavior, or people who were beaten, including the rise of domestic violence as a consequence of alcohol consumption. But let's just go back. At the time when there was lockdown 5 and 4, our hospitals did not have so much visitation from people who were injured or who had suffered from car accidents. So indeed, our hospitals were then able to accommodate people that are suffering from other diseases, including COVID-19. But once we opened under level 3, our hospitals were overwhelmed by people who basically were not suffering from any illnesses, but people who were injured in car accidents, people who had been beaten up in shebeens, in taverns. And this is a story we know very well in South Africa. We are not very good drinkers. I don't know why when we have taken, then we tend to be violent and even injure our next of kins, our wives in many instances, even people that we love. So therefore, As to the government's rationale for suspending the sale of alcohol during this time, it was basically meant to ensure that our hospitals are not overwhelmed, so that indeed our hospitals are able to accommodate people who are infected with COVID-19. Had we not done so, I think the next question that would have arisen, it would have been people who could not get hospital beds because hospital beds are not there. They are accommodating people who are injured either in car accidents or in serious fights induced by alcohol. We opted that instead of being accused that we are not making beds available and only because of people who are injured, who have come to hospitals because of alcohol-induced incidents, we felt that we must save beds for people who are suffering from COVID-19. And the only way we could do so was to ensure that we don't have South Africans or any people within our borders who then get embroiled in violent fights induced by alcohol or who get injured in car accidents in the main caused by the uptake of alcohol. We were given studies, the minister will attest to this, we're given studies of how many people came to hospitals after we opened the economy and we opened alcohol consumption on the 1st of June, and how many of those had alcohol content in them. Many. Over 50% of those who came to our hospitals because they were injured, because they were involved in car accidents, almost 50% of those people had alcohol content in their body. Therefore, we therefore needed as government to save the beds for those who need them the most, which is people with COVID, by suspending the uptake of alcohol, the sale of alcohol, and the consumption of alcohol. In this regard, we can assure colleagues that we have no regrets, because basically, this is in our toolkit to save lives. If we had not done so, the likelihood is that we will have many people who are suffering from COVID who will not be accommodated in our hospitals because our hospitals will be overwhelmed by other people suffering from other traumas. Having said that, we then allow our colleague to answer the other questions? Minister Mbalula.
Thank you very much, Minister Mthembu and media for the questions. Is government dancing to the tune of the taxi industry? Are we afraid of the taxi industry? The answer is no. We are guided by rationale in the decisions that we take, at least to the best of our ability. And that rationality is subjected to public scrutiny and to criticism, and a constructive criticism. We do that based on the balance of evidence before us in terms of each situation that we are confronted with. And the taxi industry is one such situation. Of course, there was a jumping up and down and a promise of defiance for the rules and the regulations to fill up to 100%. Government has no appetite to engage in a battle of that sort during COVID-19. Our efforts are actually focused on saving lives and making it a point that we sustain livelihoods to the best of our ability. And we are confronted with this COVID-19 which is an objective reality for us as South Africa and the world over. We've got no choice but to respond to this. Now, the reality of the matter is that we examine beyond the headlines and the brouhaha what really confront the taxi industry. The taxi industry, the DG will elaborate on that deliberately. What are we talking about when we talk about formalization and regulating the industry? And the COVID-19 arrives in South Africa when we are confronted with these issues. At least in my 6 months in this department, me and my team and the sixth administration, and then as part of the mandate of this government, my mandate top on the agenda was to fix the taxi industry, and chief among the aspects is the question of regulating the industry. So, did the COVID-19 tell us a story we don't know? No, we knew the story. All what COVID-19 has done is to unravel in the story the reality of what are the implications of an unregulated industry like the taxi industry. And we are where we are today because of that. And let me tell you the truth, and the truth only. Yes, the Medical Advisory Council, we engaged with them. They told us, no, these are the risks, but to mitigate the risks, this is what we've got to do. We are medical practitioners. We can't advise you to go this direction because your decisions are not only informed by medical advice, they are also informed by economic considerations, not political. We have extinguished the political in our consideration. Our consideration, if it was political, it will then carry weight that we are afraid of the taxi industry. It is economical. The taxi industry will perish if we continue with 70%, 50% in the country. That is the reality. And the question they place before government is that, where should we go? And it is well recorded and documented, the struggles, the ups and downs I've had with the taxi industry on them turning the relief of 1 billion rand to compensation, and even saying that it is not enough. Because in their books, the loss they've suffered, like all industries, it runs into billions. But here is the reality of the matter, is that they are not formalized like other small, medium, macro enterprises in the country to be able to get a relief, including state support funding to get them out of the woods. Because they are not formalized. And that is the reality of the matter. And when we address that formalization in the midst of COVID-19, it raises serious issues in terms of the industry and their immediate interest. And that is why that matter is on the agenda between us and the industry, government and the industry, to resolve subsidization. Can we subsidize the industry? Do we have money to do that? We do have money. It means we'll have to reprioritize in the budget and then focus on the taxi industry and define the terms of that subsidization, which goes with formalization. You can't subsidize something that is not formalized in reality. And formalization will lead to professionalization, because now you are dealing with an entity that can able to calculate revenue, but at the same time to be able to sustain itself in terms of maintaining the product that it owns. And that is now the commodity, which is the taxi itself. You must pay installment, monthly, and all of that. The terms you get into with the banks differ from one bank to the other. Some are loan sharks. This industry is the biggest, and I define it as the sunrise industry. That must be protected. That must be defended. That must be supported by government. You can say all the things. I grew up in a township. I grew up in the farms. I know no other mode of transport other than a taxi and a bus. So I know what it means. And that a taxi industry has never been supported in the past. We've dealt with issues. Formalization, we never concluded it. Who can be blamed for that? Government, okay, blame us for that. We did not conclude this matter. Should we not continue to conclude it because we've got COVID-19? No. Are we dealing with this issue as an accident? No. When COVID arrived by the 1st of April, I had marked that date, not because it's my birthday, as a taxi indaba. Not because it's April Fool's Day. Taxi indaba to discuss what? These issues. I've got a steering committee that is running. Now, it's difficult to talk about the issues that were happening behind the scenes. It's like a movie that was never concluded and somebody was dealing with it, perished and died. And only what you are doing, you are now dealing with shots that were cut, behind the scenes when the person was still alive. But they never got an opportunity to saw the light of day. So, yeah, I'm telling you that we are dealing with these issues. And you can say, go wherever you go. The main issue with our taxi industry in the country we are dealing with is that it must be formalized, and this is what I am dealing with as a minister, as I'm speaking to South Africans at the present moment. And that is why we said, remember at some point, I did say 100%, and I was attacked about that. And the taxi industry themselves, they said, no, Mbalula, we don't want to be responsible for transmitting the disease and killing people. I knew right at that time what is the challenge that is facing us. I went downtown. Some political party took me to court that they were going to take me to court. I don't know even what happened to them, that I broke the rules. I went downtown and addressed the taxi industry there in terms of the regulations. And I spoke about 100%. Because at that moment, I knew, as a minister responsible, what is the challenge that is going to face this industry. So when they came back and said, we want 100%, people said, hey, government is afraid of the taxi industry. We are succumbing. There are even cartoons, which make me laugh. I mean, it's fine. About cartooning us about this 100%. I spoke about 100% long time ago. Are we interested to go in the direction of scope and donor and all of that with the taxi industry, a tooth for tooth? No, I've said it, and easy. We've got to talk here. This thing that we are in COVID-19, government doesn't do what you like, and all what you can do as a citizen is to run amok. It doesn't work. It's not going to happen. It's not going to help us. We can't resolve everything with the belief that we've got state power. We are not a policing state. We have taken decisions including about COVID-19 and about the disaster management. We could have gone the route of a state of emergency, but we've got trust in our people that they will listen to us when they see the danger. And they did not disappoint. We don't have to go to a state of emergency in parliament and agree soldiers every corner. You don't see soldiers that they talk about every corner of the street, because it is believed that we are in this together. It is not a government thing alone. Now, if I want the taxi industry to perish and never to exist, and I don't have answers to answer how I'm going to take them out of that, is to go with what I can go with, which is 70%, or go with 100%, but at the same time with the measures that we're introducing. That include the opening of that window. It's important, the 5-centimeter opening of the window, that is it. And I need to make it clear with a disclaimer. right? The medical the Medical Advisory Council, we met and we explained to them, and they said that we can only give you medical advice. We can't give you economic advice. How you get out of the economy, the depression you are faced with, and the recession. But we can give you this. So our approach is livelihoods and at the same time balancing with, strong measures, which we then said to them, okay, what are the measures that you can give us that we need to implement? They say, implement the following in the taxi. And that is it. And that the taxi does not go on overload. 100% masks and all of that. It does not mean they agree with us about that. For them, a taxi should be at 40%. My babu, 40%. The taxi industry will perish. We're opening the economy. People are going to work. They need mode of transport to take them to work and all of that. So we need to address. You must understand, in the economics of the industry, the taxi industry begin to calculate profit at passenger number 9. The rest, up to number 8, 7, is paying off petrol and that vulavala, and so on. At number 9, then they start to calculate income. Every month, a taxi installment is between 15 and 18,000. So that's why taxis pop up everywhere, because they are chasing that 18,000. They can't make it now, that 18,000 per month. They owe deep into debt to the banks. And that is why I went to the banks and say, postpone the holiday. Maybe better days will catch up with us more than we would have expected. Yes, we are in the peak, or we are in the storm, but at the same time, we are navigating our way through the storm, and we've got to be safe out of those taxis. Whether we are 70 or 100%, out of those taxis, we must be safe. The taxis are not traveling for a long distance. It's shorter distance. You are out. You are at work. You come back in the evening, you are in Soweto, you drop off, you are back. So it's not long distance. That is why even taxis themselves are not happy that we have said 70% stays in the long distance, because there you are in the taxi the whole day. Unfortunately, we've got to wear warm clothes in the taxi. It's winter. I can imagine anyone who goes out in winter without a jersey and being warm, and rely on the fact that being in a taxi you'll be much warmer. And it is going to be worse now, because the windows will be open. And you've got to keep on putting on your mask. And that mask, you don't have even to rely, as much as the taxi driver, the same as he likes his money to come by seats from the bag, is the same passion. He must ensure that you've got your mask before you enter my taxi. You know, you sit down before you come in, Ayanda. Do we say that? Okay. So I know that some of South Africans, and particularly genuine South Africans who use taxis every day and concerned about the coronavirus, have taken us to tasks on this matter. I was at NEDLAC. I explained. The unions wanted to go for Section 77. I appealed to them, please don't. It's not going to resolve anything. The same as I went to the taxis, I asked the taxis, when they wanted to defy, I said, please don't. There's no time for war. We are all in trouble here. Let's resolve these issues amicably. And then they started to talk, we started to talk, and then that is it. Now, taxis themselves are going to ensure that, like Santaco, they will be speaking for themselves about how they are going to ensure that these regulations are implemented, supporting these regulations and government, and working hand in hand. We can't win it alone. Unfortunately, the future is not in the near horizon. We're still working on it, and the future looks good from what we are planning to do. DG will respond to licenses and expert advice. I've answered that. We did get expert advice. we get expert advice. All the time, our approach is informed by experts. And that expert advice sometimes comes, and then it is an advice that comes also in the midst of many other issues that cabinet at the ultimate and the NCCC processes and the net joins. Comrade Minister Jackson has answered the issue of alcohol. I think it belongs to him. DG will deal with steps to formalize, because I want us to deal with formalization. We are discussing that, regulating. What are we talking about? Government, are we going to subsidize? Yes, we are going to subsidize the industry. We have to reprioritize in our budget as the Department of Transport, go to Parliament, agree with everybody, and then implement this subsidy for the taxi industry. It is something very good for the country that is coming and for the taxi industry. And if COVID-19 has been anything to go by, even for the taxi industry, is to realize that dragging feet on formalization is not going to help this country. It's not going to help this country. It's not going to help our nation. It's not going to help our vision of integrated transport system that we're talking about. Because the integrated transport system must speak to the taxi, to the trains, and even to a point where we can even use one ticket going around. And then we are integrated. We are addressing issues of warfare in the taxi industry, fighting over routes, addressing issues of the subsidy, to address the relief, financial relief. You can go and own a taxi without a fear that you're going to be cajoled. Taxi industry is used by the underworld to process their dirty money. That industry must flourish to be what we want it to be. It's our future. And the leadership of the industry agrees. So we've got to deal with those particular issues. We are not afraid of the taxi industry. I think what has an arrogant government is the one that says, Uber, these taxi people are our people. Some of them were retrenched from the mines. Their last penny, they spend it on owning a taxi. Doesn't know any business. But when he was retrenched in the mine, wherever they come from, they took that money and invested it in a taxi. So when you talk about a taxi owner, you are not talking of a typical rich person. You're talking about same forces of the working class who have found solace for life survival out of an industry called the taxi industry, which over the years have been what it is. Thanks to Dala Omar, Meg Maharaj, Jeff Radebe, and up to Plate in Zimande. The efforts they've put in this. My job with my energy under Ramaphosa is to finish the job. Is to finish the job, put lots of energy on this industry and address all the challenges. And I can't address these challenges by being arrogant. In not so long ago, the reason why you did not vote for this government is because you said we are arrogant. Now, if I close my door to the industry and say that this and that and so on, I don't work like that. My door is open, my cell phone is operational. So I engage with the industry, I talk to them. Difficult as it is, I go to the ground, I speak to them. At the end of the day, when we all sober up, I say, but exactly what is your problem? They then start to tell me. I don't learn this thing from a book. I see it on the ground. The life of a taxi owner and a taxi driver. I know it firsthand. And I go down there and understand it for myself. And so it's not an easy decision that I can go to government and government take this decision. It's not an easy one. We're faced with an enemy that is invincible. We're faced something else that humanity has got to roll up and fight. And humanity will defeat coronavirus. As much as some will perish along the way and we will never reach the destiny, but we will win against coronavirus. We will win because efforts are out there to do so. All what we do is to minimize the effect of it on our people and everybody. And don't talk about corona as if it is something out there. It is living amongst us here. You know, from the interpreter to myself, tomorrow ngava kuthiwa anvuki coronavirus. Injalo lento. It doesn't care whether you are in the street or where you are, it attacks you. And that is it. So we've got to minimize, we understand. We've got to minimize where people gather en masse. That's why there are no parties. Slow down on parties, not even slow down, they are banned. You are not even allowed to visit your grandfather now or your grandmother. I forgot, my sister called me the other day in Bloom and said, when are you coming home? I said, no ways. Have you tested? You know, I've not seen them for some time. I can't visit them. I can't go there. The president have said these visits, you take corona from Joburg, uyoyifaka ezilalini. Abantu bezihlelele ezilalini bengana corona. Usuka apha ngekhohlo eGauteng. Uyolifaka deep eDzingidzingi. Stay where you are. And when you've got this thing, follow the rules. You can fight, you can win. There are many survivors out there. You can win. Sit home, don't panic, stay the course. We will win. And my last point, Minister, is about the expenses in terms of this. The expenses are going to come from government. You hear us talking about shield and all of that. We've got to order shields now. We've got to order sanitizers, distribute taxi rank by taxi rank. Gauteng, they are introducing taxi rank marshals, committees. At the same time, create some job for some people there to distribute this thing. Because if you leave them just like that, nobody oversees the distribution, that every taxi has got a sanitizer inside it, it will never happen. And that is my discussion with the MECs. Up until last night, and tomorrow we are continuing overseeing and monitoring the implementation of these measures. That's what we are going to do. And then we've got to support the taxi industry. Yes, we will support the taxi industry for 5 centimeters, but that thing, any taxi owner can pay a little bit to put the stop. What is this thing? Window stop. Can pay for that. It's not a lot of money. I don't know how much it costs, but it's not a lot of money. But as government, we will put up this. That's what we will do. And we will give you an account of, we have devolved this team from the department. We no longer procuring from our offices in terms of, and I briefed Parliament about that, we have devolved this to the provinces. That each province now has got the capacity to procure and distribute masks, rank by rank, MEC by MEC, district by district. So don't come to me at my office there and ask for masks. It's no longer there. It's running in the provinces so that it's nearer to the people. And then we're able to do that and so on. So that's what we are doing, and with the MECs to ensure the rollout and the expenses. It should be between us and the industry, but we'll largely carry, like we do, the expenses on sanitizers. Taxi industry say to me all the time, we don't have the sanitizers. I'm addressing that problem. Because if we spend money on giving out sanitizers, they must be there. And that is what is required. DG?
Thank you very much, Minister. The question from Patrick from Fleetwatch, which speaks to the extensions and request for further extensions. I think we do recognize that from the initial extension till now, there's been a number of challenges with our DLTCs, or the driver's license testing centers, and many people who have gone there have found that some are still closed and some have been open and closed, and they are intermittent because each time they detect a positive case of COVID, they have to shut the building and do all the necessary stuff. And some of the key staff, particularly at smaller DLTCs, if they are positive, then it's a catastrophe for that DLTC, because they have to prolong themselves in isolations for up to 14 days, and the centers are not operational as they are. But some of the services that have been already co-contracted with other providers, including for renewal of vehicles with vehicle discs with the post office, those services have been running fairly well. And so we have a mixed bag of the type of services that are there. However, if you have a exact driver's license card, which you want its renewal, this has been a bit of a challenge. And also some permits, including for truckers and so on. So it is for this reason that Minister today announced a further extension of 90 days. So you should count at the end of the initial extension period, a further 90 days going forward, and I think that should answer the concern you say. We would obviously look at this situation as it unfolds, and we will see how it pans out. If the system is fairly holding up, and with our plan now and the recent approval by the shareholder committee chaired by the Minister of the Road Traffic Management Corporation, we have approved the exploration of the online services and to increase our offering of online services with clear delivery plans and for people to get access to some of this type of services online. We will explore that. Should the need arise for us to extend further, it's a matter we will consider in that regard. The other issue raised was on the matter of the, Minister has answered this issue of the window jammers. I will pass on that. Now, I need to address the issue of, do you have to wear a mask in your own vehicle? If you are traveling alone, you don't need to. But if you are putting in passengers, in terms of the final dimensions that our acts provide for, particularly the Road Traffic Act, what it provides for a vehicle in terms of the dimension and the size of the roads that we do in South Africa, it will not promote more than 1.5 meters distance apart within a private motor vehicle. Otherwise, then it becomes an abnormal vehicle, which is how we deal with it quite differently, actually. So that those dimensions are the ones that inform us to say that, therefore, if you are traveling with another person in a car, both of you, then you ought to wear masks to promote social distancing or to actually limit the possibility of you infecting each other. On the issue pertaining to formalization, now ministers and members of the media and of the public, the issue of formalization is a very important part, and we need to unpack it a little bit for everybody to understand. But before 1977, there was a state monopoly in transport. The Motor Carrier Transportation Act of 1930 actually prohibited the movement or transportation of goods or passengers without a valid permit and for profit without a valid permit by the then local road transportation board or the boards that existed. And therefore, it effectively created a monopoly in the hands of the South African Transport Service. Since then, a number of acts have been passed, and I know you should know about the Legal Succession Act to the South African Transport Services, which now created even PRASA and other state organs in this regard. But importantly is that with the growing dissent of the apartheid government back then, in 1976, the riots took place, and amongst the pressures the community were now demanding, by early 77, there were bus boycotts and all of that, and with it, the government of apartheid decided to institute a commission of inquiry, the then Van Breda Commission of Inquiry of 1977. That commission of inquiry was into the transport industry and looking at various permutations, and it recommended largely that there should be deregulation and that the South African government must actually less regulate the transport sector and allow for some competition. By 1987, which was exactly 10 years later after the government studied the recommendations, the white paper on transport policy was tabled, and a year later, in 1988, the Transportation Deregulation Act was then passed. That act effectively is the genesis of the problems we now have in the taxi industry, because it allowed for a free-for-all, and you had mushrooming of these bodies and taxi people who were basically taking up the space, which now was deregulated. And since then, by 1995, when the democratic government just took office, it established a national taxi task team, the NTT, and they had finished their work by 1996 and tabled their recommendation. The key recommendation in there was that we need to re-regulate the transport industry, and particularly the taxi industry, which now had gotten a firm hold and has overtaken even some of the traditional modes such as trains and so on, and to what it looks like fairly today. So we are for the formalization and re-regulation of this industry, and we do so owing to the fact of our own understanding of where we ought to go, the current policies of the current government, but also importantly, following the Sustainable Development Goals. If you look at those goals, 8.3 provides for a target for promotion of formalization of economic sectors. And in this regard, we say annually that we project it to be an estimated at about 40 billion rands industry a year. But yet this industry is nowhere making sure that the real beneficiaries who are supposed to be the operators are actually making money. The entire value chain still does not belong to that industry, and this is a big challenge. For us, therefore, formalization is actually about adding value and about value add to this sector. And we are looking at it from various angles: sector financing, social protection, training, and the utilization of various joint combination of mechanisms that will complement the industry as a whole. So therefore, we need to drag this industry and transcend it into the formal economy, and to pivot it in such a manner that it can be able to access the mainstream economic opportunities, including positioning it to access government subsidization. Minister has set a very ambitious target for us to achieve it by 1 April next year, depending all else staying the same and the negotiations with the industry going well. That's where we should be going. But we were asked specifically what conditions have we set to achieve this. First, we are requiring that the industry should register businesses and formal business entities, and that the operating licenses be moved from the individual into the business entity, that there should be registration for tax, that there should be the transfer of the license into the entity, and that there should be registration of workers. And also we should now bring a system of regulation in terms of routes, in terms of permits, and in terms of everything. So government had gone before in this direction, but had taken half-hearted measures in getting to where we are. So far so good. We are allowing for issues of permits, but as you may know, our OLA system, the National Land Transport Information System, only provides for about 137,000 licensed, valid operators. But in reality, we've got in excess of 200 to 250, depending on whose numbers you are looking at. Those estimates are there, even by other standards 300,000 operators out there. So we have in excess of 100,000 operators that are illegal, and they call them, they say they are pirates and whatever, but bottom line is that they are illegal. And some of them have applied, and they've been issued with a receipt that shows that we acknowledge receipt of an application, and they are utilizing that receipt as a basis for operation. Now, when you have applied, it does not necessarily mean you have been granted a permit. Irrespective of how long government takes to process your permit, you can potentially say that you already have that permit, and we are sitting with that scenario. We need to first register all of those that remain unregistered and without permits, and get them permits, and we also need to then move towards that. These are the preconditions that will bring professionalization, which Minister speaks to, because formalization and professionalization must not be confused. One is a precursor to the other, and I think you do that, you can then be able to set the standards and set service standards and all of that, including for vehicles, manufacturing, for safety, for all of that. And it can be right that the industry is alleged to be notorious for being involved in fatal motor vehicle accidents. We ought to balance all of that and bring this into the equation. So I think I will end there, Minister, in the jealousy of time I've been warned. Thank you.
Thank you, DG, Minister. Yes, you warned, DG, that we didn't want to keep our colleagues for long here, but indeed we appreciate the education that you have given from this platform. Minister, we are really grateful that we have been able to explain how, as transport, we are participating as part of the collective in the combating of the spread of COVID-19. Minister, Deputy Minister, we really appreciate that. As we had said when we started this press briefing, we will be having other ministers next week that will speak to their areas of work and also inform South Africa how in their areas of work, as part of the economic cluster, they are also party to the fight to combat the spread of the disease. As we only had one minister, South Africa must not be of the view that other ministers will not come. Again, as we said when we started, we felt that if you bring too many ministers and you have a very long discussion on many issues, at the end of the day, South Africans end up missing exactly what was the focus of our press conference. In this instance, our focus was transport. We're very deliberate, and we will do the same again next week. Focus in certain areas so that we are not an omnibus in terms of our communication. Having said that, again, I would like to thank the Minister, the Deputy Minister. There was a question asked, why didn't we forewarn people before we suspended the sale of alcohol? The last time we forewarned people, they stockpiled, by the way. There were lorries, there were all sorts of things. They just bought out all liquor outlets, and they made their own homes shebins and liquor stores, and so it defeated the purpose. In this instance, we learned well from the actions of our own South Africans, and we then, indeed, if it is called ambush, be that as it may, but indeed it was in the best interest of saving lives. ultimately we had to do whatever that we needed to do to save lives. Having said that, let me join the minister and everybody else in wishing all those who have been infected by COVID-19 to get well. As we speak here, we are also passing our condolences to those families who have had their loved ones losing their lives on account of COVID-19. With those words, again, let me thank Newsroom Africa for carrying this broadcast live. Thank the public broadcaster, SABC. SABC has been feeding everybody ever since we started. They've been feeding Newsroom Africa, they've been feeding ENCA. We really appreciate, because without you taking us to the homes of all South Africans, we would not have been there. And again, we would like to thank ENCA for also making available their time and their instruments to ensure that we are able as government to speak to our people. The various radio stations under the banner of the SABC, thank you, and thank you so much. Of course, our community radio stations, we also thank them dearly. And of course, all of you colleagues who have made this time to be with us here from the various ministries, and the DG together with his team, Deputy Minister, and all the operators who are operating all these big machines. They are called videoing machines. Thank you, and thank you, and thank you very much. This meeting, until we meet again next week, this one is adjourned. Thank you very much. Order, prayer.